There's a particular kind of pain that words can hardly capture, the pain of being ignored or dismissed by your own children. You raise them, sacrifice for them, and now, when you speak, they barely listen. When you need them, they turn away. If this resonates with you, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not powerless. In today's video, we're not here to place blame or wallow in frustration. Instead, we'll explore a mindset rooted in timeless wisdom that can help you reclaim your sense of peace and authority without shouting, begging, or chasing respect. You'll discover why most parents unknowingly surrender their influence and how a subtle inner shift can turn the tide in your relationships. This isn't about control, it's about dignity, and it starts with one powerful change from within. If you're ready to stop feeling invisible in your own home and start showing up in a way that commands quiet respect, stay with me, because what you'll learn today might change everything. Number 1, the power of detachment without disconnecting love. When your own children start treating you with indifference or disregard, the pain cuts deeper than most wounds. It's not just about behavior. It's about the rupture of something sacred. The bond you once nurtured with love, patience, and sacrifice feels distant. You remember the days of closeness, of affection, of shared laughter. And now, you're left with silence, avoidance, or even outright disrespect. This emotional shift often leads to sadness, confusion, frustration, and in time, bitterness. But there is a wiser way forward, one grounded in the ancient teachings of Stoic philosophy. At the heart of this path lies the power of detachment, not as a way to escape love, but as a way to preserve it without losing yourself. Detachment, in its true form, is not rejection. It's not about shutting off your emotions or giving up on your children. Instead, it's about liberating your love from the chains of expectation. It means continuing to care deeply while no longer allowing your peace of mind to hinge on how your children respond or fail to respond to that care. The Stoics taught that our suffering does not come from what others do, but from how we interpret it. Epictetus famously reminded us, it's not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Your child's dismissive attitude may sting, but the power to define what that means, what story you tell yourself about it, still belongs to you. This is where real strength begins. When you choose to remain loving without demanding proof of that love being returned. Detachment allows you to step back emotionally, not to abandon the relationship, but to protect your own heart from the storms of unmet expectations. It's not coldness, it's clarity. It's not withdrawal, it's resilience. You stop trying to control how they behave, and instead, master how you choose to feel and respond. Think of love as the sun. The sun shines on everyone, not because it's praised or thanked, but because that's what it does. It offers warmth, light, and energy simply because it's its nature. In the same way, your love can continue to flow, not in desperation, but from a place of quiet confidence. That is the essence of Stoic detachment, shining without needing applause. Jiddu Krishnamurti once said that true freedom lies not in seeking security, but in letting go. Applied to parenting, this means your emotional balance shouldn't depend on your children's approval, affection, or acknowledgement. You can still care deeply, be supportive, and stay involved, but without making their validation the core of your identity or happiness. Many parents ask, how can I love my children and still feel at peace when they don't show respect? The answer lies in understanding the difference between healthy detachment and harmful disconnection. Detachment allows you to remain centered and emotionally grounded, even when your children fall short of your hopes. Disconnection, by contrast, implies shutting down or withdrawing in pain, and that's not what we seek. The lesson here is not to love less, but to love more wisely. When your self-worth is no longer tied to how others treat you, you become unshakable. And here's what's surprising. When you stop pleading for attention or demanding respect, you often begin to receive it. Why? Because people, including your children, respond differently to those who carry themselves with quiet strength. Detachment is not the end of love. It's its mature form. It's the transition from needing to be loved to simply being loving. It gives you the space to keep showing up for your children, not as a desperate seeker of recognition, but as a steady presence of support, wisdom, and calm. And in doing so, you don't just preserve your integrity, you become someone they may one day look to with genuine admiration. Because in the end, the most powerful influence you can have on your children is not in controlling their actions, but in modeling the peace, dignity, and emotional freedom you wish they would embody too. Number 2, you don't need to be accepted to be respected. One of the most painful experiences as a parent is the feeling that you've been quietly pushed to the sidelines in your children's lives. You may notice the phone calls becoming rare, the conversations growing shallow, or your opinions no longer carrying weight. This sense of being unseen or dismissed can be heartbreaking, especially when you remember the years you poured into their lives. And in those moments, it's natural to crave one thing: respect. But here's the truth. Genuine respect cannot be forced or begged for, and it certainly doesn't require being fully accepted. We often mistake acceptance for respect. We think, if only they understood me, if only they agreed with my choices, maybe then they'd treat me differently. But that belief leads to a dangerous emotional trap. The idea that you must be approved of in order to be respected is not only false, it keeps you dependent on the very validation that's being withheld. The philosopher Immanuel Kant once said that self-respect is the foundation upon which all other virtues are built. And this is the essence of what we must return to. Respect starts from within. It begins when you live in alignment with your values, when your dignity, wisdom, and calm become unshakable, no matter how others respond. You do not need your children to fully agree with your path to live honorably. What they need to see is your unwavering steadiness. You earn respect not through appeasement, but through consistency. When you stop trying to be accepted and start standing tall in your truth, something shifts. You become someone worth noticing, not because you demanded their attention, but because your character silently commands it. Think for a moment about someone you hold in high regard. It's rarely because they tried to please everyone. More often, it's because they had the courage to walk their path, regardless of others' approval. That same strength lies within you. Your children may question your views or reject your lifestyle, but over time, it's your grace under pressure, your wisdom in silence, and your strength in solitude that can change how they see you. Stoic philosophy offers powerful guidance here. It teaches that we cannot govern the behavior or opinions of others, but we are always responsible for how we carry ourselves. You don't have to lecture your children or fight for recognition. Instead, live with calm purpose. Be still when provoked. Be firm when dismissed. Be wise even when unheard. These actions, over time, speak louder than anything you could say. Seneca once wrote that true nobility isn't in what others say about us, but in how we conduct ourselves daily. Respect that's built on your emotional maturity and integrity is far more enduring than the shallow approval of fitting someone else's mold. Sometimes the breakdown in a parent-child relationship happens because we try too hard to adapt, to be more agreeable, to avoid conflict, to win affection. But in doing so, we lose sight of our own identity. And ironically, when we try to be accepted at all costs, we end up being taken for granted. But when you stop chasing validation, when you stop performing and simply be calm, centered, and consistent, you regain your self-respect. And that is when others, including your children, may begin to look at you through new eyes. The deeper truth is this: being respected does not require being understood or accepted. It requires being authentic, self-assured, and rooted in principle. When you hold yourself with quiet confidence, you teach others how to treat you, not through control, but through example. So stop waiting to be accepted. Start showing up as the truest version of yourself. The moment you do, respect, real, lasting, quiet respect, often returns, not because you demanded it, but because you became someone who naturally earns it. Number 3, end the silence with understanding, not volume. When your children begin to pull away, ignoring your messages, avoiding conversations, or acting as though your presence no longer matters, the first instinct is often to raise your voice. You may feel the urge to confront them, to demand answers, to shake them out of their silence with a flood of words. But what many don't realize is this: raising your voice doesn't bring clarity. It rarely heals wounds. In fact, more often than not, noise deepens the divide. True wisdom lies not in making more sound, but in breaking silence through intention, not emotion. When faced with distance in a relationship, especially one as sacred as that between parent and child, the challenge is not just the silence itself. It's how you choose to meet it. There is a kind of silence that wounds, yes, but there's also a silence that holds power. A silence born not from resignation, but from calm understanding. Instead of reacting impulsively, instead of using loud words to be heard, the wise person listens first, not just with their ears, but with their presence. They understand that thoughtful silence can carry more weight than any speech spoken in frustration. Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoist philosophy, once said, "Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know." This doesn't mean silence is always superior. It means that rushed words often lack the clarity that calm reflection brings. And when you are ignored by someone you love, especially your children, the temptation is to shout to remind them you exist. But noise does not command respect. Presence does. Imagine for a moment that your children have stopped reaching out. Weeks go by without a call or message. You could respond with frustration. Remind them of all the times you were there for them. Tell them how much it hurts. But what does that achieve? Likely, it only builds more walls. Instead, what if you waited? Not passively, but patiently. What if you responded with a gesture of grace, like a handwritten note, a thoughtful gift, or even a moment of simple, genuine openness when the opportunity arises? This is what Stoicism teaches us. Epictetus reminded us that nature gave us 2 ears and only 1 mouth for a reason, because we should listen twice as much as we speak. That doesn't mean silence forever. It means choosing your words with precision, acting not from hurt, but from intention. If your children finally reach out, respond not with guilt or pressure, but with presence. Let them feel that your love still lives, not in demands, but in quiet strength. Wise silence doesn't seek to control. It invites understanding. It says, I am still here, and I am still myself. Over time, that energy shifts the dynamic. A child who once feared confrontation may begin to trust your space again. A son or daughter who felt judged may begin to feel seen. And that's when healing begins. Not with raised voices, but with quiet courage. Breaking the silence doesn't mean forcing a conversation. It means transforming your approach. It means recognizing that the pause can be powerful, that restraint can speak louder than anger, and that stillness can open doors that shouting only slams shut. Maybe instead of asking, "Why don't you visit me anymore?" you simply offer warmth the next time they show up, without demanding an explanation. Maybe you write a heartfelt letter, not to accuse, but to express, free of blame. Or maybe you just hold space for a new beginning, without pressure, without conditions. As the poet Rumi once wrote, "Raise your words, not your voice. It is rain that grows flowers, not thunder." In other words, it's not how loudly you speak, but how deeply you connect that fosters change. When your children feel that you are still a source of peace, not someone who clings, but someone who steadies, they begin to see you differently. And slowly, the silence that once hurt can give way to something new: respect, dialogue, and even reconciliation. So when silence lingers, don't rush to fill it with noise. Break it with presence, with patience, with wisdom. That's when change takes root, not only in them, but in you. Number 4, change the narrative. Change the relationship. One of the most persistent challenges in our relationship with our children isn't always rooted in what they do. It's in how we interpret what they do. The real conflict often begins not with their silence or forgetfulness, but with the internal story we begin to write in response to it. These narratives can quickly become distorted by assumptions, past wounds, or unmet expectations. And once the mind locks onto a painful interpretation, it reinforces itself until it feels like truth. This is where a powerful shift can occur. The moment we learn to question the story, we regain our power. Before reacting to your child's silence, ask yourself, is this what's really happening? Or is this just what I've come to believe is happening? That moment of inquiry can change everything. The Buddha once taught that while pain is part of life, suffering is optional. In our relationships, that suffering often doesn't come from the event itself, but from the meaning we attach to it. Your child may not call as often, and without realizing it, your inner voice might say, "They don't care about me anymore. I must not matter." But what if the reality is far more neutral? Maybe they're overwhelmed, emotionally exhausted, or unsure how to bridge the distance. Changing the narrative opens space for understanding, instead of closing the door with conclusions rooted in fear. When we interpret someone's behavior as rejection, we tend to react defensively. We withdraw, criticize, or fall silent ourselves. And just like that, the relationship begins to erode. But if we shift the interpretation, if we say to ourselves, perhaps this is a rough season for them, maybe this isn't about me at all, we respond differently. We soften. We listen. We leave room for reconnection. Think of your relationship as a story unfolding on screen. In this film, you are not just the main character. You are also the writer and director. If the script you're working from is based in resentment, every scene becomes a confrontation. But if you rewrite that script with compassion and curiosity, the energy of the story changes. Dialogue becomes possible. Respect begins to rebuild itself. This is where Stoic philosophy offers profound guidance. Epictetus taught that our distress does not come from external events, but from our opinions about those events. He reminds us to challenge our first interpretations, especially the ones that create pain. If you begin to observe your child's behavior without the lens of judgment, new possibilities emerge. You begin to see a more complete picture, one that includes not only your own emotions, but theirs too. Let's take a simple scenario. Suppose your child cancels dinner plans at the last minute. The old narrative might say, "They clearly don't value my time anymore." But what if instead you told yourself, "They may be struggling with something I don't yet understand"? This cancellation might not be personal at all. That shift in story changes your emotional experience entirely. Rather than feeling rejected, you feel empathetic. You remain open. The psychologist Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." Often, the pain we feel isn't only about our child's behavior. It's about what their behavior awakens in us. Maybe we feel unappreciated, invisible, or left behind. These are deep emotional wounds, but they can be softened when we acknowledge them without building an entire story around blame. Changing the narrative doesn't mean ignoring real issues or pretending everything is fine. It means choosing to see the situation through a wider lens. Instead of focusing solely on how your child has disappointed you, ask yourself what they may be struggling to express. What fears might they be hiding behind their silence? What pressure might they be carrying that they don't know how to share? This practice doesn't just transform your emotional landscape, it reshapes the entire relationship. When you stop reacting based on assumptions and start responding from self-awareness, you create space for something new to emerge: understanding, healing, and even deeper connection. So the next time you feel dismissed or unimportant, stop and breathe. Ask yourself, what story am I telling myself right now? Is there another, kinder explanation? Just this pause, this small act of narrative reframing, can be the very thing that begins to mend what once felt broken. Because often, what heals a relationship isn't a dramatic change in the other person. It's a quiet revolution within yourself. Number 5. Release what you hoped for. Hear what's really there. One of the most powerful but often overlooked sources of pain in our relationship with our children doesn't come from what they do. It comes from what we expect them to do. We long for the warmth they once showed so easily, the phone calls they used to make without being asked, the gestures that once told us we were seen and valued. And when those moments stop coming, our hearts begin to ache. But more than the silence itself, it's the expectations we silently carry that create the deepest wounds. Over time, we construct internal images of how our children should behave, how often they should check in, how much they should care, how they should express gratitude or love. These images aren't born from malice. They often come from love, hope, and a deep desire to remain connected. But when these expectations don't align with reality, suffering takes root. Not because our children have necessarily failed us, but because reality didn't match the script we wrote. This is where a radical but liberating shift must begin. Let go of the expectations and begin listening with fresh ears. The Roman philosopher Seneca wisely noted, "The greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment." And nowhere is this truer than in family relationships. Letting go of expectations doesn't mean giving up on the relationship or pretending you don't care. It means softening the rigid inner demands that keep you locked in frustration and choosing instead to engage with what is, not just what you hoped would be. When you're not clinging to what your children should say or do, you begin to actually hear them. You hear their tone, their pauses, even their silences. You stop listening with a mental checklist and start listening with your heart. Often, what they fail to say speaks louder than what they do. That sigh, that deflection, that long pause before answering. These are emotional signals we miss when we're too busy waiting for an apology or hoping for affection in a specific form. True listening, as the Buddhist master Thich Nhat Hanh once taught, is an act of compassion. When we let go of expectations, we stop placing the weight of our emotional needs onto the other person. And in that space, healing begins, not just in the relationship, but in ourselves. We give our children the freedom to show up as they are, rather than how we wish they would be. Consider a simple but common example. Your child hasn't called in weeks. Each day that passes feeds a quiet resentment. You begin to tell yourself stories. They've forgotten me. I must not matter anymore. But what if, when that call finally comes, you choose not to confront or guilt them? What if, instead of expressing disappointment, you just ask how they're really doing and listen with openness and care? By doing this, you don't just shift the tone of the interaction, you change the emotional landscape of the relationship. Your child no longer feels judged or pressured. They feel seen. And in that emotional safety, a space opens up for closeness to take root. It's also important to recognize that expectations flow both ways. Your children may also carry assumptions about you, perhaps believing that you expect too much, or that you hold judgments they can never meet. Their silence might not be rejection. It might be fear. By letting go of your expectations, you model something profound. That love can be unconditional. That connection doesn't have to be earned through performance. Letting go of expectations doesn't mean giving up your desire for a meaningful relationship. It means no longer letting that desire become a source of suffering. It means creating the emotional space for your children to meet you where they are, not where you imagine they should be. And in doing so, you give both of you a chance to build something deeper, something based on real understanding, not silent frustration. The next time you feel that familiar ache, that sense of being let down, of not hearing what you hope to hear, pause and reflect. What expectation am I holding right now? Then ask yourself, can I release it, even just a little, so I can hear what's actually being said? When you shift from expecting to listening, something beautiful happens. You invite connection, not through force or guilt, but through presence. And slowly, without pushing or pleading, you create the conditions where closeness and respect can grow. Not out of obligation, but out of mutual trust. In the end, it's not about lowering your standards. It's about raising your awareness. It's about trading the demand to be heard for the courage to hear. And when you do, the entire relationship begins to change. Not just for your children, but for you. Number 6, compassion begins with understanding their journey. When your children pull away, when they seem distant, unresponsive, or even cold, it's natural to take it personally. You might find yourself thinking, what did I do to deserve this? Or, why don't they treat me with the same care I once gave them? These are human thoughts, born from love and a desire to stay connected. But if left unchecked, these thoughts can become a heavy burden, creating walls of resentment that only deepen the divide. What if, instead of reacting with hurt or frustration, we tried something far more powerful? something that doesn't come easily, but can change everything. What if we responded with compassion, not as a way to excuse harmful behavior, but as a way to understand it? Compassion, in its truest form, doesn't mean condoning disrespect or suppressing your own emotions. It means stepping back from judgment long enough to ask a different question. What might they be going through that I can't yet see? When you feel dismissed by your children, it's easy to assume malice or indifference. But sometimes, the silence you receive is not a rejection of you. It's a reflection of their own internal battles. Maybe they're overwhelmed by work. Maybe they're struggling with their own relationships. Maybe they're wrestling with their identity, their sense of purpose, or emotional wounds they've never been taught how to express. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, reminded us in Meditations that when we encounter the flaws of others, we should reflect on our own. Not to blame ourselves, but to remember that imperfection is a shared human experience. Our children, just like us, are trying to find their way in a world that often feels chaotic, uncertain, and emotionally draining. Their silence may not be about you. It may be about their own survival. To practice compassion in this context is to view your children not as people who owe you something, but as individuals on their own journey, sometimes lost, sometimes burdened, and sometimes afraid. It requires you to move beyond the immediate sting of being ignored and instead ask, what kind of pressure might they be under? What pain might they be carrying that they haven't found words for yet? This doesn't mean you suppress your feelings or accept mistreatment. It means you balance your rightful pain with an openness to see the bigger picture. Being compassionate means creating emotional space where your children feel safe enough to be vulnerable and where you can remain steady, not reactive. Imagine this shift in a real conversation. Instead of asking, "Why haven't you called me lately?" you simply say, "How are you really doing?" No pressure, no guilt. Just a genuine desire to connect. That simple change in tone opens a door, and what may come through it is honesty, perhaps for the first time in a long time. The Dalai Lama said that compassion is the desire to free others from suffering, and often the suffering we don't see is the kind that needs compassion the most. Your children may assume you wouldn't understand their problems. They may fear judgment, or they may have internalized a belief that their struggles aren't worth mentioning. When you create a space where they can speak without fear of criticism or correction, you become a source of calm in a storm they may not know how to name. Compassion isn't always grand or dramatic. Sometimes it's found in quiet presence, in the decision not to lecture, in the moment you simply sit with them, willing to listen without offering solutions. Over time, that presence begins to shift how they see you, not as someone who demands their attention, but as someone who holds space for them to be fully human. The Stoics taught us to accept what is beyond our control, and to focus instead on how we show up for others. Your children may not always act as you wish. They may not always say what you need to hear. But if you can meet their struggle with steadiness, with empathy, not expectation, you become a foundation they can return to. Even if it takes time, even if it doesn't look like the reconciliation you imagined, this shift opens the possibility for something deeper than mere obligation. It opens the path to mutual respect, and perhaps, in time, a new kind of closeness. So the next time you feel shut out, before drawing conclusions, pause. Ask yourself not just, why are they doing this to me? But also, what might they be carrying that I've yet to understand? In that moment, you take the first step toward true compassion. And from that step forward, healing becomes possible, not only in your relationship with them, but in the peace you begin to cultivate within yourself. Number 7. Serenity is your final answer. When emotional tension with your children becomes the norm, when conversations turn into conflict, or you feel a growing sense of distance and disrespect, it's easy to believe that the situation is beyond repair. The instinct may be to argue, to explain, to demand change. But in truth, the most powerful response available to you isn't force, it's serenity. Serenity is not a passive surrender. It is an active choice to reclaim your inner space, to remain grounded even as relationships waver or expectations fall short. It is the discipline of choosing calm over chaos, peace over provocation. And it's one of the few things in life you can always control, no matter how anyone else behaves. Stoic philosophy offers a profound reminder. While the world around us may be unpredictable and difficult, our response to it is always ours to shape. Marcus Aurelius, one of Stoicism's greatest voices, said, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed." That's not about pretending things don't hurt. It's about refusing to let external events rule your internal world. You may not be able to control how your children treat you, how often they reach out, or whether they respect the sacrifices you made. But you can choose how you show up in those moments. Serenity becomes your silent strength, a form of power that does not rely on dominance or persuasion, but radiates from quiet confidence. Too often, when relationships feel strained, we attempt to correct, to explain, to chase closeness. But the harder we try to force connection, the more resistance we often face. Serenity, by contrast, invites openness. It doesn't beg for attention or push for change. It simply is. And that quiet presence over time becomes something others are drawn to. Think of yourself not as someone trying to navigate every emotional wave, but as a lighthouse, steadfast, unmoved, shining consistently through any weather. Your children may be the wind, sometimes rushing in warmly, other times distant and cold. But your peace doesn't have to be dictated by their moods. If you anchor yourself in serenity, you remain whole regardless of their direction. Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese sage, taught that the best fight is no fight at all. This doesn't mean giving up on the relationship or pretending not to care. It means not engaging in every conflict, not letting every slight pull you into emotional turmoil. You preserve your energy for what truly matters: your own dignity, your own clarity, your own sense of self. When you feel ignored, pause. Before speaking, before reacting, take a breath. Ask yourself, will my response bring us closer or deepen the divide? That brief moment of stillness can be the difference between fueling a conflict and sowing the seeds of peace. Serenity allows you to stay in control, not of others, but of yourself. And that is where true strength lies. Even if your children don't acknowledge it directly, they notice. They feel your shift. When you stop trying to fix or force and instead embody calm confidence, the emotional pressure dissipates. You become a presence they can trust, not because you say the right things, but because you are the right energy. Not demanding, not controlling, just quietly present. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and author of Man's Search for Meaning, said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." Serenity gives you access to that space. It's the practice of standing still when everything tempts you to react. Choosing serenity doesn't mean you won't feel pain. you will. There may still be grief, disappointment, even loneliness. But you won't be owned by those emotions. You won't let them decide how you act, how you think, or how you speak. You rise above them, not by denying your feelings, but by mastering how you carry them. And in doing so, you offer your children something they might not even know they need: a model of calm strength, a mirror of stability, a space where they can return without fear of judgment or demand. So the next time you feel that deep ache, that longing to be seen, that frustration over what's been lost, remember this: you don't need to win every emotional argument. You don't need to prove your worth or fix what's broken in one conversation. You only need to return to the peace within you. Because serenity is not the absence of conflict. It's your response to it. It's the stillness that steadies the storm. And when all else feels uncertain, serenity is your final answer. The place where strength, love, and self-respect meet.